You're right, Harrison. He's just sleeping on the floor. That's what I can see right now. It's too hot for pussycats. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Debbie and I read a lot of books. The cat is on the move. You right, boy? Yes, boy! He has been fed. He's just hot because it's hot. Anyway, today's book is We Played with Fire by Catherine Barter. This is probably one of my new favourite books. And it's in the 13 plus, it's in young adult. But it doesn't feel like a kid's book. It doesn't. It's in fiction, historical fiction, horror, supernatural, ghost stories and paranormal. It says here it's 100 pages, but I don't think it felt longer. I was reading the majority of it on my phone, but it was definitely longer than 100 pages. I want to say it's about 150 pages. This was based on a true story. It's based on the incredible true tale of the Fox sisters, the girls who made their fortune in 19th century America by speaking to ghosts. I'll get in with that blurb and tell you why I completely fell in love with the story. Maggie has witnessed impossible things, but no one believes her. And now her family has taken her away to spend the winter upstate in a remote, freezing farmhouse. Bored and angry, Maggie and her younger sister Kate start to play tricks. Wrappings on the floorboards above their parents' bedroom, cracking their toes under the table, and telling tales about noises in the night. Then the house starts to make sound of its own. Neither Maggie nor Kate can explain it, but it seems as though someone or something is trying to speak to them. But yeah, as I said, it's inspired by a true story of two young girls, Margaretta and Catherine, Maggie and Kate. Basically, they kind of started off the idea of a seance, because it didn't really exist before these two and their tricks. There is a note at the end of the book from the author talking about the real life sisters and what happened with them and how the author has changed things. The author has really admitted what things she changed to make it a fictionalised version of this girl's story. But I went into a deep dive onto the Fox Sisters Wikipedia page after I read this book, and I'm completely fascinated by it. It just opened up a world that I didn't know about, because I didn't know anything about the Fox Sisters before I read this book. And then when I realised it was based on a true story, it was just like, I feel like I need to know everything about all of this. I felt it was a really interesting way to tell their story. And you see them both as teenagers. So Maggie is the older one, she's 15, and then Kate is 12. And I think in real life this all started when they were about 11 and 13, 14. But at the beginning of the book, Maggie references a lot to an incident that happened before they moved. And you don't find out actually what happened until what felt like about halfway through the book, where basically she experienced something that she thinks was slightly paranormal. The school that she went to was built upon a burial ground. They were starting to do an extension to this school. Basically, as they dug, they found bodies. And Maggie feels like they're disturbing something, and it leads to an incident in which another student is seemingly pushed down some stairs and breaks both of her arms. A lot of people think that Maggie did it, but Maggie insists that it was some kind of spirit. She basically says that there was a man that she saw who she feels like could have been a ghost, who just did not seem to want people there. And so Maggie thinks that it was this ghost that pushed her. Other people think it was Maggie. And it just leads to the family moving to this old farmhouse, basically just to get away so that Maggie's not being attacked by other people who think that she pushed this girl down the stairs. But Maggie is very much convinced. She feels like she's witnessed something paranormal, but it's like she doesn't quite have the words for it. And when they get to this old farmhouse, they get really bored, and Maggie and her sister Kate, they start playing tricks on their father. So they realise that by making certain noises in their bedroom, they can create kind of an echo in the kitchen downstairs. And so they mess around and they play tappings on this sideboard in their room to freak out the people downstairs, and then they start putting apples on strings and dragging them across the floor, and they realise they can like crack their knuckles, and they can crack the knuckles in their toes. Are there knuckles in toes? They can crack their toes, basically. You know, you can hear it in my wrists. I click because I use my wrists so much for work. That sounds really dodgy. I'm a massage therapist, if you don't know. So I'm doing these kind of movements a lot, so things click everywhere. But the girls realise they can manipulate the toes into making those clicky sounds, to the point where people just don't know where the sound's coming from. And so when they're wearing like long dresses, nobody can quite figure out where these little cracks are coming from. It leads to an event in the farmhouse where the neighbours get involved. There comes a point when the girls manage to convince their father and their neighbours that the house is haunted, which, to be fair, isn't that much of a stretch, because I think the neighbours already think that the farmhouse is haunted. And so that leads to a journalist turning up and getting everybody's information on what happened in the house. And you realise that that article doesn't actually include the points of view of the young girls, just the neighbours, who are just like, no, we were there, we heard it all, we saw it all, there's nothing to explain it. And it leads to an accusation of somebody who had the house before, thinking that he murdered a peddler in their house, and that the peddler is haunting and trying to get that message across. The thing is, though, throughout this book you have Maggie experiencing things that cannot be explained. This book leans into the idea that Maggie was having actual moments of spiritualism, and the idea that maybe she could see something, and maybe there was a talent there where she was able to just tap into something. It's just like, when it comes to spiritualism and stuff like that, it's just like, do I believe in ghosts? Maybe. Have I experienced a ghostly moment? Possibly. After my granddad passed away, there was a moment when I woke up and my granddad was sat at the edge of my bed just telling me everything was going to be okay. It was most likely a dream, but it felt very real. And for me, that created so much comfort for me after my granddad passed away, of having him at the end of my bed. Because I remember it was as I was falling asleep, I felt something heavy at the end of my bed, like near my feet, and I thought it was the cat, because the cat gets into bed with me quite a lot. And when I kind of like looked up to see if it was the cat, there was nothing on my feet, even though it felt like the cat was sleeping on my foot. And then as I nodded off, suddenly I could just see my granddad there. And yeah, it leaned more to being a dream, but at the same time I can't deny the fact that when I was fully awake I was very aware of something sitting on my foot at the end of the bed. So I'm sure there's other people who had experiences like that, some people who never had an experience like that, but this book really looks into that side of things, of when people do have something where they just can't explain it. And I absolutely adore this book. It was so interesting to learn about like the birth of spiritualism in America, and how what they did is still done. In this book you see them creating a seance for the first time, and they're trying to find like the perfect ambience to be able to do what they're doing, from like turning off the lights and using candles, and how accidents that happen then later become part of their routine. And yeah, it's just so interesting just to see the birth of all of that in this book. And the fact that when they talk about like having a sit down, and I think it's their big sister Leah who says, a seance, a sit down, that's what this is, because I think that's what seance literally means, it's a sit down. But yeah, just throughout the book seeing both Maggie and Kate and their journey with their family and friends. And it is very much Maggie's story. You are seeing it through Maggie's point of view, even though it's in the third person. It's mainly Maggie's story that you're seeing. And when you look at the Wikipedia page, it's so interesting just to see what happened, because this really delves into their childhood of it. But both of them with their older sister Leah, who essentially became their manager. They went into old age with it. I mean, when you first type the Fox sisters into Wikipedia, it says the Fox sisters were 3 sisters from Rochester, New York, who played an important role in the creation of spiritualism. Leah, Margaretta and Catherine. The 2 younger sisters used rappings to convince their older sister and others that they were communicating with spirits. Yeah, a lot of it started off as a prank, but then the book really looks into the idea that maybe there was something else trying to communicate with them while they were pranking people, because there was so much stuff that even the sisters couldn't explain. It looks like they were about in their 60s, late 50s, 60s, when they passed away. This was their career. After their older sister Leah got the letter, which included the article from the original journalist that looked at what happened in the farmhouse. According to the book, Maggie sends that clipping to Leah, and then Leah goes and says, oh, what you're doing is amazing, let's try and make money off it. And in the Wikipedia page, it was in 1888 that Margaretta confessed the whole hoax. But it seemed that it was to piss off her older sister Leah. It almost seems like the older sister Leah manipulated them into turning it into a career. And especially because they were teenagers, they were young when it all started, and the fact that it was all pranks. And then their older sister kind of fed into this whole thing of leaning more into the spiritualism movement, which was happening at the time anyway, and saying, let's make money off this. And she managed their careers. You see Margaretta really against her older sister Leah throughout all of it. The book covers maybe a year and a half. It's condensed to what actually happened in real life. I think Maggie's still like 15 by the end of the book. So yeah, I think it's like just under a year that the book takes place in. And they just kind of speed stuff up of Maggie understanding her role in the spiritualism movement and trying to figure out what she believes in. When people come out and accuse them of being associated with the devil and going against religion and going against God, and she starts questioning it. And then when somebody close to them passes away and she's just there going, no, we are not going to contact that person. And you see a seance when the person passes away where it looks like she's about to spell out their name. And she's not in control at that point, because she was just like, she's by herself when she does that seance, and she's not with her sisters at all. She's just at somebody else's house. They say, oh, do you want to have a go at doing something? And she was just like, fine. Like, they're not paying any money, so if nothing happens, nothing happens. But she just lets her mind go blank and accidentally starts spelling out part of this name, and you're just like, oh no. Because you've been given hints throughout the book that this person's incredibly unwell. So when you realise what's happening, it's just like, oh no. It's like I saw it coming before it actually happened. And I was just like, it seems like she's actually about to spell his name out, even though she doesn't actually know that this person's dead yet. And when she goes back to New York, and when she goes back to the hotel where her and her sister have been taken to kind of carry on this seance thing, and they're just like, oh, so-and-so, whatever, and she's just there going, no, I need to speak to them, and it's just like, it's all that undercurrent of going, no, this person's dead. Maggie is in complete denial, even though it's obvious when she's doing that seance by herself that there is something on the other side that's trying to talk to her. It really does go into like the multiple layers of what you believe and what you don't believe, and whether Maggie is aware of how much she's manipulating the situations that she's in. But then also, like, that question mark was like, does she have something where she can communicate? It just puts so many question marks over it. But I must admit, I'm one of those people, I just think kids just can tap into something that a lot of adults can't. And for some people, it carries into adulthood, and for some people, it just disappears. It's like the idea of people like less believing in magic as they get older. I just really enjoyed this book, and it's so much more than a young adult book, because it's got the history in there. So if you're a good fan of like history retold and just history in general, and if you've heard of the Fox sisters and you want to know a little bit more about them, the author does incredible research. She has like a bibliography at the end where she talks about like where she got so much of her information from. She admits it's fiction and that, you know, things have been changed and amended to be able to tell the story that the author wanted to tell. But it's just fascinating. And the fact is, even though it's not 100% faithful, you can still go and read about the actual Fox sisters and what they went through. And there's so many different, obviously with the Wikipedia page, there's books out there that just focus on their career and looking at the relationship that the sisters had. Yeah, I just found it fascinating and I really enjoyed it. So it's We Played With Fire by Catherine Barter. And there is your front cover. You can tell why I picked it up, because a lot of the time on BorrowBox, I look at the book cover first, and they always say don't judge a book by its cover, but the fact is, if it's got a good cover, it will draw you in. And this cover drew me in, and then once I read the blurb, it was just like, that sounds like something that could be incredibly interesting. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. You can chat to me in the comments if you ever want to talk about anything that I've talked about. And if you've got any recommendations, yeah, just pop them down there. I do read everything. So I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, everybody.